they move things forward. Hello?
I know that from a painting perspective, like Moab in the Forest Service, everything has to be gray, and it's a specific gray paint. And so you paint your microwave radios gray, you paint everything gray.
So they have to. So okay. Okay, so this is normal to go through Forest Service this way. They're having, since we're running communications through the fiber, even though it's on our road, on our prism of the road, even if it's on disturbed land, I was just floored. Even though we do an EPA for our roads because we're required, the above and beyond for Forest Service just about blew me away. That I didn't know if they were just doing that because they didn't like what we were putting in, or what we wanted to put in.
That's how the Forest Service.
Yeah,
Okay.
They take time back.
Certain height that you can put things, certain color, and just a lot of requirements. They're not picking on you.
They're not. One thing I did.
And I know of. I mean, they might be, but it doesn't sound like it.
One thing I did find out, as soon as it's going to take us about 2 years to secure the right of way to purchase it back and redo the prisms on it. That was a little bit of a shock to go through all the lands people to get it to where it was rightfully supposed to be ours. After it is mine, I'm fine. But within the meantime of our builds that we've got going this summer, it's not. So.
Trying to think back on our projects, and every time we get involved there, it's just, you're not going to be able to just do something in a rush job. It's just going to take a while. So you give us.
Yeah, funding was freed up for a canyon, and we were like, let's do it. And then I'm like, oh my gosh. It was a shock. So I just wanted to kind of brainstorm with the group and make sure it's just not me that was there. Okay, thanks.
I can't say for sure that it isn't, but it doesn't sound.
I was hoping you had a really great piece of wisdom, something I was really missing.
Remember, we're all telling you what a value your trade program is to the state.
I thought everyone was as nice as you, Don. So, okay, well, thank you so much.
Okay. We also wanted to hear an update on FirstNet efforts. At the last meeting, Steve Proctor presented to the group about what's going on with his role in FirstNet and the really tight timeline that they're working under. So as this is constantly changing, we want to keep this group up to date and as involved as possible. So I'd asked Sharon to give us an update because Steve Proctor is actually in DC today. So do you want to take this up with me?
Sharon, before you start, I have to go because if I stay longer, I can continue to do the intellectual capacity of the group. But I did want to mention to you guys, we had a meeting here with the governor from 10 to 12, I think it was, for the Business Resource Centers and for the Governor's Economic Coordinating Council. If you can hear me, I can hear.
Okay.
So I did want you guys to know that some of the research and some of the work that you've been doing with Tara is directly affecting how we're laying out state services, our ability to use online components for those state services. So I thought it would be, I want you guys to just know that your work's counting and that people are looking at it and they're measuring and making decisions based off it. And thank you for all your efforts. So I dropped by, so appreciate it.
Eric.
Sorry to delay. Go back to Lynn's contact and work. Or so, I mean, you have somebody you're working with.
Have you made contact with like the head ranger? Ranger, I guess, is a high position. It's Forest Service. And so that's that. We start at the ranger, we've done public comment. One went well and one did not.
Is that who you work with as well?
But what I was going to offer is that I'll ping Jeff on this, and if there's someone that we can refer you to, we'll see.
I know with our situation, we work with the local field office that I think was located in Price. And so as far as specific contacts, I don't know if there's a lot of different regional-based Forest Service offices, but that's the route we went. and I'm not certain what the titles were, the people that we were working with, if they were forest rangers or whatnot, but that's the route we went.
And you've got, then it's not always the Forest Service. Process, no matter what you. Saying that there's just different, and it may.
I was asked to briefly talk about FirstNet. FirstNet is the First Responder Network Authority, an independent authority within NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Department of Commerce. The legislation that established FirstNet is the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012. It was signed by the President on February 22nd, and I do have a copy of it for anyone who really wants to read the entire thing. You would want to go directly to Title VI, which is on public safety, and the legislation reallocates the 700 megahertz D block spectrum to public safety, and this is the portion of the spectrum between 698 and 806 megahertz. And it authorizes the FCC to reallocate and auction the 470 to 512 megahertz, that's the T-band, spectrum which is currently used by public safety entities. The legislation authorizes the FCC to conduct incentive auctions to raise $7 billion for building and managing the nationwide public safety broadband network. It authorizes NTIA to provide $135 million to support state and local efforts to plan and integrate with the network, and it sets aside $20.4 billion of the incentive auction revenue for deficit reduction. Access to the network is provided for the various entities that are listed here, and also secondary users, for example, utilities and critical infrastructure providers. The network is precluded from providing commercial services directly to consumers. The legislation establishes the First Responder Network Authority, and that's what they're calling FirstNet, for planning, construction, and operation of the network. And the Technical Advisory Board for First Responder Interoperability, which is responsible for developing minimum technical requirements for the network to ensure interoperability. And if you all remember, that's what Steve Proctor talked about last time, and he is actually one of the members. The FCC announced the members, and this is to give you an idea how quickly it's going. They announced the members on March 22nd. Their recommendations must be submitted back to the FCC by May 22nd, which is next week. The FCC must approve the technical requirements by June 20th and forward them to FirstNet. And then the Interoperability Board will then be done with their jobs, and that'll be terminated on July 6th. FirstNet will consist of 15 board members, and it will serve as the public safety broadband wireless licensee, the actual holder of the licenses, the FCC licenses. FirstNet will coordinate the deployment of the network, and they will be issuing and managing contracts, establishing policies for the network, issuing RFPs, consulting with federal, state, tribal, public safety, the FCC, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and they will be negotiating with commercial network providers for roaming agreements. As far as state and local coordination, FirstNet is required to consult with state and locals on issues such as planning the most efficient way to integrate with the network, the placement of towers, adequacy of security, and training needs. And as far as participation, states can either opt in or opt out. So the legislation allows states to opt out, but there are certain requirements. So FirstNet will provide a plan or an RFP to states, including their proposed allocation of the network construction funding. And the states opting out will have to submit a plan to the FCC to show that they are interoperable with the national network. The state plans, if the states want to opt out, they have to demonstrate certain minimum requirements, and I've listed a few up there. If the FCC approves the plan, then the state may apply to NTIA for a construction grant, and then they will lease spectrum capacity from FirstNet. But if the FCC disapproves the state plan, then the FirstNet plan will move forward in that state. So that's kind of a brief overview. Questions after reading it all?
Aaron, I had a question.
Yep.
I saw that there was a request for information that was released yesterday by NTIA, and we got an email from the National State Broadband Initiative Director asking for our programs to comment on the RFI, and I'm just wondering in terms of process how you think that those comments play into what the NTIA decides to do.
Well,
Because you've been in
know,
it,
used to work at the FCC, so I would be the one sending out requests for notice of inquiries or notice of proposed rulemaking. And I think people, if they have valuable information, they should submit comments. And I would invite anyone to submit comments in this regard. And if you can, be very specific, include data that can then be used as a decision when making decisions, because that's really how the whole process works with the notice and comment, and they're asking for input. And the only thing I would say is that you can file individually or file as a group or file on behalf of your client or who you represent, but please file.
And I was just interested, who has decision making?
Well, I can tell you that there are stakeholders and they're asking for input and that decisions are being made quickly. With regards to opting in and opting out, it would be, I'm not sure, I thought that Steve Fletcher had something, was part of that process, and so I'm not sure how that's going to be handled at this point, but that the FCC, when the proposal goes in, the FCC will decide whether to approve. And I have to tell you that if the request goes in, the plan from the state, and it's not quite there, there is a give and take, so that the FCC can ask for a supplement or ask for questions. Then, so it's not just a one-time plan approved or not approved. Yes, yes.
Yeah, would it not be that rude? Public safety. We have public meetings, and so I bet you it's going on that.
And it might even be different in different states. That would be one of them.
You know, that's something I'll look into and report back to the group who that entity is. Moving on to our next agenda item. We've invited Debbie from USDA to present about Community Connect grants, a little bit about the program and who would be eligible to apply and all of the details. So.
All right, so I'm here to discuss our notice of funding availability that has come out on May 3rd for grant funds available for eligible applicants to apply for a minimum of $100,000 to $1.5 million in grant to provide broadband service to rural communities who do not currently have broadband service of any kind. Eligible applicants would be for-profit, non-profit entities, public or city, public offices of those kind. Tribes can apply for this. The only people that can apply would be an individual. You would have to have the authority to legally operate the system and enter into a contract for the grant. So those are the requirements for just about anybody who can supply broadband would be eligible. The project must serve a rural area that currently has a population of 20,000 or less based on the U.S. Census. It cannot, I think the only thing they can have is maybe a satellite type access to internet. They can't have any other type of internet available. It can be only to one community. You couldn't combine, say, a county-wide that has several communities. It has to be one community. The broadband transmission service needs to be free of charge for 2 years to all critical community facilities located in the proposed service area. And then provide a community center with at least 10 computer access points within the proposed service area and make the broadband transmission service available for free to the users for 2 years. Eligible costs would also include what it would cost to operate the system for those 2 years. In the NOFA, it has an exact breakdown of how much you can pay to an administrator per year and those type of things. And the total operating costs cannot exceed $250,000. There is a match of 15%, and it can be in kind or cash of the total project financing that you're requesting from the federal government. The NOFA does close on the 18th of June. You can apply through grants.gov or submit a hard copy to our national office. And you can get all the documentation on grants.gov. They have the application process and all that on site.
Debbie, I wondered, what is broadband according to your
According
NOFA?
to, let's see, I got the.
What is the definition?
What's the definition?
Everybody seems to think.
Everybody see. I see. What they're asking is that the grant provide eligible with broadband service that would foster economic growth, delivers enhanced educational, healthcare, or public safety services. So some type of access to telemedicine or education. We do a lot of education online type of things, but something that provides access for people out onto the internet or to receive educational type
I guess
services.
my question is, I'm wondering specifically, if we're talking about areas with no broadband service, does that mean that they don't have adequate broadband service? Does that mean it's less than the stated goal of 4 megabits per second, or it's just anything, even dial-up?
The only thing they can have, I think, on the teleconference was satellite. That was it. No, it would have to be they would look at the entire, and they will base that on the website that they have on the national website of populations that are not currently served by broadband. It would be on the USDA on the, and I have a lot of information here that you can go out and look at it.
They did also say on the webinar, I listened to a webinar this week, they did say that if you feel that whatever, mapping, they are willing to
look at it. So.
Actually,
That's what these,
do you want to?
Yeah, so the comment that I wanted to make is I looked at the slide deck from the webinar, and it really didn't seem to me that it emphasized that you can't have any broadband availability at all. What was quoted on the slide deck was, don't request grants to duplicate existing broadband services provided by other entities. And that was the only thing that actually referenced what was there on the ground.
I think if you went to 7 CFR 1739, that is the most explicit document that would cover this particular grant. The NOFA doesn't talk specifically.
But the USDA slide series didn't actually explicitly say if you've got a community that's half covered and half not, that community would not be eligible. It seemed like the only thing in the slide deck that really pointed out was the emphasis that you can't duplicate existing services that are already being provided. So I think that's something that we need to follow up on.
And it could be the way they score it, because they are scoring based on rurality and
right, and the scoring formula was how rural is it, what's the economic need, and then how well, and this is the subjective part of the scoring, is how well do you document or make the argument that you're providing something that doesn't exist, whether it's infrastructure or the internet access, right?
Like at the public library or the community.
But I think we need to get a little bit more clarification on that half a community thing.
How do they define community?
It's based on the current U.S. Census. So it has to be on the RAND. If it's not on the census, they have accepted the RAND McNally to determine a community.
Recognized in the latest
U.S. Census.
and published by the Bureau of the Census for Indian.
Right.
Well, we actually, in preparation for this presentation, had AGRC put together a few maps. You'll see there the USDA Community Connect Fund scoring documents. And I think Bert can go into a little bit more detail about how these maps were put together. Okay.
I'm later on the agenda, but maybe it would be helpful to look at this right now.
Yeah, we
Since
can
we're talking
look
about
at
it.
mobility fund later.
That one's more, that one there, this 7 CFR is a lot more explanatory than the NOFA.
So the idea then is to go to a single community and provide services to all.
As a community, through the community center, through the library, through the.
Yeah, it's a facility.
So it's not to every home, but to have a place where the community can go and have access to it. And they do offer funding to build the infrastructure to house it in if you were building a community center or if you need to rehab it. The funding can be used for that as well as operating costs. Correct. It's very clear in the that's why I printed out the 1739. And it could be maybe because people are questioning, because they do talk about T1 in here is not necessarily being broadband accessible to the community. A satellite is not considered, if you have a satellite uplink to internet, is not considered broadband. So I think maybe that's why they're leaving it a little open.
So it says communities where broadband is not available might mean, Sharon, you probably can help us interpret that. It might mean areas where broadband is not available within a community as opposed to the community itself. And that's where, again, I think the clarification is probably needed. So this first map that I've got up here on the screen, and if you hopefully took a copy of it, there on the table. This is the communities in Utah based on, and what we're looking at are the communities that census recognizes in the 2010 census, and they're just shown as points on this map, and they're given points according to the scoring for the Community Connect Fund. If they're under 500 people, they get 40 points, just an objective score, down to if they're between 10,000 and 20,000, they get 5 points. So that's the objective measure of rurality. I'm not sure if the areas along the Wasatch Front count. I mean, they're included in the Wasatch Front, the small communities, like, for example, South Salt Lake might, or that's not a good example. But yeah, right. So I'm not sure about that, but this just, and there are too many of them to label on the map, but the darker, the more red and the darker red, the more points it's going to score for rurality.
Can you just say why some cities or?
Yeah, so there are 320, Utah has 245 incorporated municipalities, and I believe each one of those is recognized as a census community. And then there are another maybe 70 or 80 communities that are not incorporated that the census recognizes as a community. So you'll see places on here like Moab and Hanksville, but you'll also see places like Teasdale, which is not incorporated but is considered to be a community. Will be another example of that. Paul's Crossing down on Lake Powell is a little in some of the tribal areas. Some of the places that are in the northern part of the Uinta Basin that aren't incorporated. But what you won't see here are the little teeny outposts that the census hasn't recognized as a community. So you won't see Ivapaw, you won't see Callio, Park Valley, some of those kinds of places. The demographic numbers are rolled into something else, and they're like the unincorporated areas, and they're not considered a recognized community. There is the option of going to the Rand McNally data. I didn't have that available to me this week, so what we're looking at is, just keep in mind this is just a starter for giving you an idea of how different places in the state would score in the Community Connect funding review. Let's see if I can go to the next one. Okay. So the next map says economic needs score, and what's going on here, the same 326 census recognized communities, they provide a median household income for that community. And I think that's part of the reason why the Trout Creeks, the Ivapaws, the Callios aren't in here, because once a community gets to be below a certain size, you can't do things like publish median household income without compromising privacy. True. We had the same issue at AGRC with when we were helping the counties to establish voting precinct boundaries. Once you get below a certain size, it's pretty obvious what's going on with the 7 or 8 people who live in a precinct. Okay, so this is the next piece of the scoring criteria, the economic need. It's based on the state median household income and the percentage of the community's median household income relative to the state's. And so you get more points the more lower your median household income is. And you get 30 points if you're less than half of the median household income for the state. You get 5 points if you're between 70 and 75%. And the cities here are, there are few enough of them that we could put the labels on, and they're colored based on where they score in economic need. So this is combining those two objective criteria in the Community Connect Fund. We've got the rurality plus the economic need, and I'm only showing the communities that scored over 45 points on this particular slide, but I think when we put these maps on the internet, we'll have a link to a Google spreadsheet that will have the full scoring for across all 326 communities. But of those who scored over 45 points, you know, we've got a pretty good range, and we've got a lot of communities that are getting either close to or right at the maximum number of points that you can get in the objective criteria for the USDA Community Connect Fund. So hopefully that gives some folks, or gives folks an idea of just kind of maybe what some targets good applicants would be for this grant project. So I'm going to sit down unless there are any questions about this specifically.
Nobody asked the question.
Well, so okay, that's a good question. We could lay the broadband data on top of this. We're going to see that most of these places are covered, at least partially. However, the grant has two components, the way I understand it. There's infrastructure, which would probably relate to providing some sort of broadband service, and then there's the public access component. And if there's no free public access, then it probably doesn't matter what the coverage is. You could be eligible to apply under those grounds. So we purposely left the broadband data off of this because we don't know where that, well, what if half a community isn't served piece? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I left my notes. That key language, I think, is toward the end of the slide deck from the webinar, where they basically say, you know, what things you can't do. You can't apply for to put in services if they already exist. So we got to figure out what that really means. Yeah.
So I will email.
So as with all the maps, I think the FCC Mobility Fund maps, we're going to put these online on the broadband blog, and that will be a good place for us to provide that updated information and links to data if people want to play around with this themselves.
Does everybody know how to get to the blog? You just go in the About tab, and there's a link to the broadband blog. We'll post all of this information.
And I actually, on the webinar, I did put in
And usually they upload those up on the internet, so I'll look and see.
The regulations, and then any interpretation.
Any interpretation, and whether they put it through policy or in a numbered letter, but this is the statutory limit, you know, the guidelines that they typically follow.
So could you just say again how much funding is there and what the individual award size can be?
They have 10.3 million. The minimum grant would be 100,000, and the maximum grant would be 1.5 million.
Do they have a target number of awards, or is it just
However it falls out, and they'll be ranked and rated and scored accordingly until the money's gone.
So there isn't a cap on number per state?
Nope, just it's ranked and rated. So.
Are there any other questions? Debbie does more than just this Community Connect grant program, so if you have any other questions for our USDA representative, yeah, if you want to pass
Handouts
those around.
on some of the other broadband programs they offer. If you want to attend the PowerPoint on the 24th, here's the sign-up information that you need, and then the note. I have the NOFA here, and the application scoring sheet. So if you want to know how they score, what they look at, here's the whole application scoring.
And we'll post these on the blog too.
Okay.
No other USDA questions today? Okay. Let's go ahead and thank you so much, Debbie. I think that was really informative for all of us. We will go ahead and move on. I put over on the table the press release from the FCC regarding the broadband adoption pilot program. I don't have much to say about it other than I think that people should be aware that it's out there, and if there is any effort behind anybody applying for this pilot program, we would love to help facilitate your application in any way that we can with data or any way that we can be helpful as a project. I also wanted to mention the FCC's Connect to Compete program. This is, Steve, do you want to talk about this a little bit? You participate in this, right?
We do,
Right.
talks about the program and some gaps in performance. Last year across our haven't had a lot of started with as an offer. So we launched the program late last year. Here taking expanding the targets for a relaunch. Questions, ideas, putting together what we on this place we can go.
Great, thank you. And overall, I think it's interesting that the FCC is moving, from more data gathering centered programs, I mean, from our perspective, to more adoption focused programs. And so I think we're going to see a lot happen with this going forward too. So just something to keep your ear to the ground about. I guess moving on to the next item, I wanted to just have a short recap of the Legislative Interim Committee hearings yesterday. There were two big ones regarding broadband issues. The first in the Taxation and Revenue Committee, and then in the afternoon, the Public Utilities and Technology Interim Committee. And in the first Rev and Tax hearing, we heard Senator Bramble express an interest to revamp the telecommunications taxes and fees system as we know it. He sort of put it forward to the committee and asked, sort of gauged interest in from what I gathered, and many of you were there as well, the committee seemed very interested in this issue, especially trying to have a technology neutral parity approach to it, which I thought was very interesting. And so I think it's something we definitely should monitor, and it's not an effort that will be finished this year from what the committee said, but it's something that will be ongoing, and so you should definitely watch out for those hearings going forward. Were there any comments about the rev and tax hearing? And then the afternoon hearing on the Universal Service Fund was, I guess, Stan's not here, but he presented an overview to the committee of the changes that will be occurring because of the Connect America Fund. I don't know that the committee quite grasped what's happening. I don't know. And, you know, there were other companies. Eric made some comments. Eric, what? Yeah, Eric's comments were very brief. I think it's going to be an interesting issue, and just from my outside observation, I think that the biggest challenge is going to be educating the legislators, because it seemed that getting into the technical aspects were not productive. And, you know, it's hard, though, because when you're talking about making legislative changes, you will need to get into the technical aspects, and they will need to understand it on some level. But, Eric, did you want to add anything?
Microphone turned on.
Just grab that.
I was just going to say that I think that, you know, obviously going forward, it will be important to have the various parties, the industry providers and other interested parties, Public Service Commission, DPU, and Tax Commission involved in both issues. And so Senator Bramble, I had an opportunity to talk to him today, and I don't think he's opposed to getting interested parties together. And obviously it's going to take more than just interim committee discussion to come up with potential solutions for tax parity issues. And USF, as that unfolds, I'm sure that there will need to be additional attention paid to that issue. But neither issue is done, and as you mentioned, tax parity, that will be a long ongoing effort, I'm sure. And USF, depending on how things proceed, I guess will depend on when that issue is brought back before the legislature. So.
Yeah, and something that I thought was interesting is that the committee really seemed to be hungry for information. So I think they definitely want to hear from everybody in this room, all sides of the coin as it will be. And so I would not be timid about talking to the legislators about this issue. And so were there any other comments on the hearings yesterday? Okay, great. Well, I think that ties nicely into our next topic, because the Broadband Advisory Council report will be publicly released June 19th, and I cannot say how helpful everybody has been in providing comments, and we'd also like to recognize Sharon for her amazing editing skills. She is really amazing. And so we'd like to present this to the group today as the final draft for acceptance, and this is what we will be officially releasing. And my only comment would be that if you did read the report, or you contributed to the meetings, which you all look like familiar faces, be sure that you get your name on the report.
Yeah, you can just let me know if you need it.
So I asked Kelly if she would just go through some of the changes that were made from the first draft, which was presented, and what we have today is the final draft.
Thank you for all of your, like she said, thank you for all of your cooperation. It was really great to have. I felt like we at least had somebody areas that was able to look at the feedback. So I'm just going to do a very quick overview of what some of the changes. There were a lot of changes that were just little word changes. I'm not going to go into that as much once we added a little bit of additional language dealing with some of the ESF issues, chapters, and then they also added in some information about being named one of the first affiliate networks that USU can, and so added a little bit more language dealing. Also added two recommendations. We changed the original edit was evidence or seen public as a council. Our role is more encouraged. We also added a recommendation working with providers continue to meet. Now going on to library section, those were the edits in the library section were pretty minor. We added in the mobility to the book. We added in talking about. And then in the economic development section, there in public safety, we added in a little bit more of an explanation. Proctor is also just added another recommendation on that effort with FirstNet. On to the healthcare section, there were some minor changes to the word that section, and then the original recommendation was to address funding options to support telehealth beyond the ARCHES program, and under the recommendation, we've changed that to say adoption of permanent rules and the transportation, under the recommendation of UDOT, we originally had language talking about in looking at that legislation, felt that there were some things that could impact. I don't think that we, as a and under the recommendation of, we added just a little bit more information at the UDOT record trade model.
They really like that competitive advantage.
Yeah.
They talk about it all the time.
So we were asking to put in a little bit more language in that area. And then moving on to rural broadband access section, we had several people looking at it. We had purposes other, and so we pulled it. So that it would be So we just make that it is something that. And then I also added in information on the federal grants that have been received by the. What those grants are, what's going on.
We noted that explicitly.
Yes, yeah. It is there, yeah. Specifically included that issue, writing that grant, that it is. And I think that that's great, first release. Added the recommendations to encourage tribal representatives to participate in the advisory council meetings. Only other thing added is just there are recommendations about the document. We just changed it to a complete. So if you have any questions,
Yeah, sure. I can email it to you. Does anybody else want a soft copy? Okay. Well, how about the problem, it's in draft form, and we were, because this, I don't know how to say this softly, it needs to stay as a confidential working draft, so it might come to you as a PDF, if that's all right. Okay. Okay. So we will. I'll have a sign-up sheet, and we'll just pass that around right now. Just put your name down, and I think you have everybody's email addresses. So.
And what do you mean by confidential? Just within the.
Because it's
council.
not public yet.
Under. It hasn't been. Right.
Well, under grandma rules, because we're a state agency, if it's a confidential working draft, it's not public yet.
Okay.
And so we will be releasing it June 19th.
Okay. Great.
So I'll send around that sign-up sheet.
Okay, so I tried to do that as briefly.
And can I just add one thing? Is that certain people in this room worked very hard, and I received emails after 9 o'clock at night. So I just want to say thank you for your efforts. Not easy.
Big milestone for this group. It's our year anniversary next month. How should we celebrate? I'll just pass this around this way, and then it can go to the back. So if there aren't any other comments on this, we will assume that everybody is okay with this. And if your name isn't on it, like I said, you need to email us ASAP so we can get that put on. But in terms of the press release, that will be going out. We don't have a draft of the press release, but we'll make sure you all get a copy or get notice of the release when it goes out. So, and the release will go out 2 days before our next meeting. So our next meeting is June 21st, and it'll go out on the 19th. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on with our map of the month feature. I kind of like this feature. It's our new thing. So I asked Bert this month to come up with an idea, and Bert had the brilliant idea of doing some data analysis regarding the FCC's mobility fund. And this is the three other maps.
The really colorful ones.
The really I guess I should back up. The really colorful one is availability by speed, and another one is a population overlay. And those maps are just updated maps according to our latest NTIA data submission. Because as I was looking through my binder, I noticed we haven't passed out the overall coverage maps to this group in a year. So those are just for your information, and we're not talking about those two today, but these are the mobility fund maps that Bert's going to discuss.
Isn't it handy how Utah is shaped like this?
Yes, it's great for one-pagers.
Really.
Yeah, have a place for your legend.
Brilliant.
What would be the worst state to be if you were making maps on 8.5 by 11 inch paper?
Florida. Hawaii.
Hawaii would be bad.
I don't know the answer.
You
I'm
ever
just
thought
throwing it
about
out.
it?
There gotta be some bad ones. I would say Maryland's pretty awkward just because it's the funniest state boundary out there. So the FCC's got this website, fcc.gov/maps, and they've got a bunch. They kind of do something similar to what we were thinking about doing, with kind of a map of the month. And they put out a map, interactive map, a few weeks ago, and it shows the Phase 1 eligible census blocks for the Mobility Fund. They've got some other good stuff there too, but it's a pretty cool map in that you zoom in, you get more detail, and it's pretty basic. They haven't gone to all the trouble to muddle it up with colors and symbols and all that kind of thing. And what you can do is hover over these census blocks, and it will tell you, we're in Tooele County, Utah. There are 941 unserved blocks by mobile broadband. Population is 148 people who are served in the county. And once you zoom in at more detailed level, it'll actually tell you about that particular block, I think.
Where did they get that data?
Hang on just a second. Maybe it's just telling us about the counties. So anyway, kind of an interesting map. What they did is they took the broadband data. Actually, if you look at the notes on the map, it says that they compiled information from third parties, submitted by third parties, and that's the state of Utah and the providers that participated in the broadband project, and who knows, other people perhaps. And they also factor in the data from American Roamer, which is a commercial data product of where the different mobile-based technologies are available around the country. And interestingly enough, American Roamer now actually uses the state broadband data in a lot of cases. So one of the things the FCC and the NTIA were looking at was using American Roamer data to kind of ground truth the data submitted to the states from providers. And they then realized that American Roamer was actually using that same data to build a product now. So they had to throw that approach out. Anyway, so they did some analysis based I would say mostly on the data that is submitted by the states. They overlay that over census blocks, which is the smallest geographic unit that the census uses to count people in. And they picked the census block areas that they wanted to use for this first round of the Mobility Fund reverse auction. And my understanding is that they're going to ask potential providers to submit bids as a reverse auction for providing services in these unserved areas. So on this map site at the bottom, there's more information, and this particular link lets you download the list of census blocks that comprise Utah's Phase 1 eligible areas. And so we did that, and we made some maps with it. And we took, there's kind of a similar approach to what they did with that interactive map, but with a little bit richer data. Come on. So first thing we did is we looked at population. And this is the map that I brought up here and put someplace else. It's right behind me. So this first map, the red, green, and blue map, if it's got a color to it, other than that pink that's just showing you the kind of general population areas in the state. So if it's got a color, the blue or the green or the red, it's an eligible area. So all the census blocks are colored with red, green, or blue. If it's green, it's a census block area that doesn't have any population within that block. And some of these blocks are really big, and some of them are really small. And basically, we just colored them all green. If it's a census block that's eligible for this phase 1 mobility fund reverse auction, and it has population that's colored blue. And from the data that we have at AGRC, those areas are then further colored red where we know there are residential structures. So red in this case is where we believe the people are within the mobility fund phase 1 eligible areas. So it's just trying to get a little bit more detail. And I think that, if you were a potential bidder, you'd want to know, what's my return going to be on the infrastructure I'm going to throw up. One component is I'm not going to be able to serve people, right? People at their houses. The second map is building on the concept that the FCC did in their interactive map, which is looking at the distribution and type of roads against these eligible blocks. They just counted the total road miles. Well, I've looked at roads data for 15 years in my field, and just because there's a road there, it doesn't tell you a whole lot. So I think that their approach for how many miles of roads probably works for Iowa. For Utah, it doesn't work as well. So what we did is we colored the census blocks based on does it contain a state or federal highway? Those are colored red. If there isn't a state or federal highway that cuts through that block, maybe there's a federal aid eligible local road, and these are sometimes referred to as the county B roads. They're roads where the surface is improved and there's drainage on both sides. They tend to be put there because they're the best way to get around, or they're going to some kind of attraction like industry or something like that, but they're not at the state highway level. And then the other blocks that didn't have a federal highway system road or a federal aid eligible road are colored gray. Again, just kind of trying to tease out a little bit more the information about these particular areas that are up for the reverse auction. And then the third one that we looked at, and basically the approach here is just we're taking data that we've got in the State Geographic Information Database that we thought might be interesting to look at, and just throwing it on top of these eligible blocks. This third approach kind of tries to factor out things that the road and the population data would speak to, and tries to look more at what of these kind of hinterland areas, what could be going on there that might justify broadband. And we took data from the Division of Water Resources. Every year they construct a water budget for the state, and they build this database of irrigated, sub-irrigated, non-irrigated agricultural lands. And we took anything that had any type of irrigation on it, and we painted it green where it was found within any of these eligible block areas. And the thought behind this was, maybe you're a farmer and you either have a modern pivot irrigation system in place, or you're thinking about it. Maybe you want to incorporate some soil sensors. Maybe you want them all to talk to each other over broadband as opposed to over your own kind of local network. where are some of these areas that might fit into that category. So these might be unpopulated areas. They may not have major roads by them, but there might still be a case for broadband availability there. But any questions on that? Oh, and the other thing that's kind of interesting, this data set, this map data set that Water Resources maintains, not only do they track the irrigation status on the land, but they also track what they believe the crops are on those lands, or what the specific agricultural use is. So, we could have done a similar map for corn and soybeans, or alfalfa, or what have you. It's really detailed information, and I just thought it was kind of interesting that they do that. So those are I guess the maps of the month. If anyone has any ideas what, I would extend this to both the Community Connect Fund maps and also these Mobility Fund maps. If you've got anything that it would be helpful to see, or any ideas to explore further, we can make those maps. I think that we'll wait and see what happens with the clarification, and I think we'll also try and get that Rand McNally data set incorporated into those maps. But if anyone has any, it doesn't make sense for every provider who's interested in this kind of thing to go out and do their own maps. We ought to do them once and get them out for everyone to play off of. Pretty much. Yeah. Any questions? Good. Thanks.
Thank you, Bert. I thought that was. I do have a question. How long does it take you to do that?
To do what?
Just to take information from and all together and
Yeah. So.
the colors, and does it take a week, a month, what, 2 hours?
It depends. It depends on the project. So. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. I'll tell you the answer as long as Tara and Kelly close their ears. We had our state GIS mapping conference in Bryce Canyon last week, and a lot of folks in our office were down there for that. And we came back and we kind of started on this idea Monday, but we also had to put a lot of fire, so we really started it on Tuesday afternoon. And then really we hit it hard yesterday afternoon. And part of Tara and Kelly wanted to see these so they could incorporate them into the handouts, so we didn't have to print them out and bring them ourselves, and we just weren't ready. But we mostly did it yesterday afternoon, although we've been talking about the ideas for a while.
But they're related, so
Yeah.
you did the group together.
Yep. And Utah probably has better digital geographic data than any state in the country. And so luckily these data resources more or less are ready to go in a lot of cases, and that makes it fast. So and then we spend an hour fighting about colors and that kind of thing, and hit the print button.
Colors, logo. Do you have a printer that's really huge?
We do. We have a 48-inch wide printer, and most shops have a one that's 5 feet wide, and we're on our 8th year of the same big printer, so we're thinking about getting a little bit bigger one. But yeah, if you guys have any mapping interests, we're funded as part of the Broadband project grant, and we need ideas for things like this, and are happy to try and take something and run with it.
So I guess we can just wrap up with our our next meeting will be on June 21st. That will be at 10 a.m. I want to mention that meeting. And if there's agenda items that you would like for us to add on, if you have an idea, I'm looking at you, Julie. Or if you have an idea for a map of the month, anything like that, please just let us know, because we're at the point where next month is our year anniversary, and most of our